Hello everyone and welcome back to Watersprite Film Festival 2021. I'm Ben Francis, I'm head of events for this year's festival.
Hi everyone, I'm Jade Franks. I'm a writer, performer and president of the Cambridge Footlights.
And after a brilliant opening ceremony last night with the Steve Kapadia, we are joined this morning by an equally brilliant keynote speaker. Tamsin Greig is an award-winning actor who has starred across British stage, television and film for the last 20 years. Tamsin is an Olivia Award winner, a thrice nominee, two-time BAFTA nominee, and has even kissed Matt LeBlanc. So without further introduction, please welcome Tamsin Greig to the main Watersprite stage.
There it is. Yeah, it worked. I pressed a button and it worked. It's a miracle.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Tamsin. I said without further introduction, which is of course true, but on top of being an actor, your Wikipedia bio describes you as a narrator and comedian. How would you describe the nature of what you do?
Yeah. I mean, labels are interesting things, aren't they? You know, I would say first and foremost, I'm a woman. And yeah, I think that me and my agent are careful about that use of the word comedian because I think it's, in a sense, it can be reductive and diminishing and possibly lack potential for imagination. So I just generally call myself an actor. You know, people don't say Imelda Staunton's singer. You know, she is a brilliant singer, but you know, that's just one tool in her extensive toolbox. So yeah, I try to avoid that because, as my children are always telling me, you're not funny. So I, you know, if things happen to be funny because of the material, that's great. But you know, I'm just serving it up.
And I guess on that point, you've done so much from Shakespeare to sitcoms to a musical to The Archers. Would you say that that comedic kind of label comes from when you do, say, a couple of comedy roles, you tend to get stuck with that label as a comedian rather than as a serious actor? Would you say that's kind of how it works?
Well, it may well also be to do with the fact that comedies tend to be on platforms that people can access. There happens to be more airtime. You know, if you've done, you know, I've done 6 series of the show Friday Night Dinner, so there's 37 potential episodes to watch. I've also done a 5-part BBC adaptation of The Diary of Anne Frank, in which there are not many jokes, but that's only 5 half-hours. So, you know, just content-wise, if you want to see the straight stuff, you know, I did a 6-part series for BBC One called White Heat, which went across the whole of history in London from the 60s to the present day. Really beautiful series. That's 6 hours. You know, when you've got 37 episodes of Friday Night Dinner and Black Books and Green Ring and episodes, and you know, there just happens to be more content. So people go, oh, well, that's what she does. But it just takes a bit of digging if you want to see me being serious.
And in terms of, you say that kind of label between comedy and drama is quite reductive, especially with some of the Shakespeare you've done, where you know some would be traditional comedies and some would be traditional tragedies. Do you try and bring both to the role? Do you try and bring both those elements to the roles? Because you know it's never that clear cut. With comedic elements, there's dramatic elements in everything you do.
Yeah, I think that's life, really, isn't it? Yeah. You know, just going to the shops can be intensely difficult, or unbelievably hilarious. You know, I think we're in a beautiful soup of experience, aren't we? And particularly when I was, for example, when I was asked to join the company to do 12th Night with Simon Godwin at National Theatre, and it was the first time that the role of Malvolio was to be played by a woman. And the reason I took that on, well, one of the reasons was that whenever I've been to see 12th Night, I've watched it and thought, this is not funny. The play is funny, but this character Malvolio and what happens to him it's not funny, it's brutal. And so I sort of I went into this supposed comedy in order to redress a balance, I think, for me personally, that I think that character is a walking tragedy.
Yeah. And when you approached that role, did you have redeeming that character in mind for the audience? Were you thinking about the audience, or were you thinking about it from yourself and yourself as an actor trying to redeem the character of Malvolio throughout kind of the history of Shakespeare? Or were you thinking of a contemporary audience when you did that?
Yeah, I think maybe a bit of both. I think that's a good question. I think we don't just do something for ourselves or for an audience. It was, you know, I don't think it's inappropriate for me to say that when the National Trust approached me, they wanted to talk about a more traditional role in it that you would expect. So, you know, if they say, well, how do you feel about playing Olivia? I was like, well, yeah, you know, but then it's been done before. You know, a white woman has done that part before. So let's really, really choose to go out of the house when it's something challenging, because leaving the house is challenging. So let's make sure that it's something that's robust and is going to stretch ourselves. So we then had long conversations about who is this person? Am I playing a man? Is it Malvolio? So am I becoming less of myself and just playing a man? Or am I becoming more of myself and playing a woman who's playing a man? Or am I becoming everything and playing a man who may be a woman, but is probably a man? But then maybe it's intersex. We don't know. And the more we developed it, the more we realized that actually it needed to be a woman who was in love with a woman. And then I started thinking about the audience because I thought we're now in a conversation which is too hot, it's too difficult, because she is treated so abysmally in the play. What are we saying then? What are we asking an audience to think about? Because the audience has to be complicit with the way that she's treated. That's what's beautiful about that final line when she says, I'll be revenged on a whole pack of you. And it's pointed to the audience, because the audience are complicit. So if you're agreeing to condemn this woman for being in love with a woman, you're asking an audience to go on a very treacherous journey.
Mm.
So I felt quite complicated about it, but then we found a way.
Yeah, and do you think the fact that you were a woman playing a woman rather than a woman playing a man, or a man playing a man, do you think that is what kind of lent itself to it being more like a tragic kind of interpretation of the role rather than a comedic one?
Yes, possibly. If I had been playing a woman playing a man, there may have been more of a dislocation, that I wasn't completely inhabiting the experience, you know, because she is female and I am female. Mm-hmm. But if you're putting those two together, male and female, and you know, whatever that means, because you know it's so wide now, and that conversation is so deep and rich. Yeah, there may have been more of a dislocation, so that the actually there could have been too much of a commentary, which gives space. You know, there are fissures then where comedy potentially comes through, because there is something funny about seeing a man pretending to be a woman, or a woman pretending to be a man, or a person pretending to be something that they are not. There is potential for comedic energy. So yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. I wish I had.
And I think we'll probably return to that production a bit later on. But to kick things off, I think, could we ask about, you know, when did your first interest in performing and acting begin? Was your childhood about film and television and theatre, or did it come a bit later? And kind of what was your route into acting?
Well, we used to be taken to the theatre, you know, maybe once a year. There wasn't a whole lot of money around in our family, so it was like a big deal. And like at New Year's, we would be taken to the ballet, and I did a lot of ballet and dance when I was growing up. So I thought that I was gonna be a dancer. Tried to get into the Royal Ballet School, and they take a photo of you when you're 11, and they go, nope, because they know she's going to be way too good. I was like, that's rude, because how do you know? Of course, here I am, big bird. There was no way I was going to be the right size and shape. Possibly not a good enough dancer. Who knows? But so that element of performance, I think, was always in there, and dance was always something that made me feel like I was more connected to myself, because I think we are physical beings. Then when I was at secondary school, there was a very, very healthy English department. and productions were put on there. And so and that in fact is where my playing male roles started, because I went to Canvas with Girls, and so I got the roles of the men, and that was. But actually, it started even before that, because the picture that we have of me in my first production at school was in the Nativity play, and obviously I wanted to play Mary. Obviously, I wasn't going to get that part, and so I had the classic role in the Nativity story of the Roman soldier, which I've never seen in any other Nativity play. I remember the line. I remember my line. I stood there in a paper hat and a pillowcase, and the line was shouted quite loud: "Names, names, names. It's enough to drive a Roman soldier up the wall." And we've got a picture, and there's a kid sitting there with his tea towel on his head and the thing wrapped round as a shepherd, and he's looking around at me, quite afraid. I think I had quite a loud voice. I was quite afraid. I mean, I totally inhabited that role of Roman soldier. It was a difficult census, and so I think it was all just starting to bubble around then. And then I tried to get into drama school and couldn't get in.
Yeah. Just on a slight detour, I think it's an interesting question. Jade, as a actor and writer yourself, what was your role in a nativity play growing up? Were you the Mary?
I was a cow in one of them, which I, again, don't really remember there ever being a cow in the nativity, but yeah, I sang a song about, having udders and stuff. It was very fun. There's a video of it, and we watched it over lockdown, actually, with my parents, and very, very embarrassing, but very, very fun.
So how old were you?
Probably about 8, I think.
Okay, so you were playing a cow singing about udders. Okay.
Yeah, it was a very interesting role. I really had to do a lot of method acting to kind of get into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the start of my career.
Well, I guess we talk about, modern updates, reinterpretations of traditional plays and stuff. So, there's proof of that. You mentioned quickly about drama school. What was your approach to that? Was it something you were really set on in terms of becoming an actor? Or was it an application you sent away and thought, who knows? And then how did you feel about not going to drama school afterwards?
Well, I'd had a preparation for that, because I couldn't get into the National Youth Theatre either. So it was sort of kind of like, a repeated no. And so I went for the auditions at the different drama schools. I went for 5 drama schools one year, didn't get in. Went for the next year, didn't get in. But at the same time, I was also applying for university and just seeing what would come up. And the second year I was applying, I got a place at Birmingham University, and was thrilled, absolutely thrilled that I got that. So I just thought, well, that's my path then, and had a great time. And I think in some ways, no's that happen in our lives are very creative. Those things that go, this is not your path, this is not for you, and that we can see them as failures and have a very negative connotations on. But actually, I think that they're closed doors in order to get through open windows.
Yeah, I mean, I can completely relate. I also didn't get into National Youth Theatre and also got rejected quite a few times from quite a few different drama schools. So I completely can empathise.
Cambridge.
But I guess on that point, how different do you think it is now compared to when you went to university? Because I read I think it was the Guardian article the other week about how more students are now going to universities rather than to drama school, because you have that like critical element and you write more essays, and the university experience is more rich and you meet way more different people from different backgrounds. And I guess my question is, how different do you think that is today to when you went to university?
I don't really know, because I didn't go to drama school, and I don't really know people who are going through drama school at the moment. What I think really is that it's about who you are as a person, and that if drama school is the place for you, it's the place for you. If university is the place for you, it's the place for you. And sometimes we don't know until we're there, and it's the doors opening and closing, which are kind of like the things that are just guiding us along our way. You know, it turns out that, of course, the work that I did at university is absolutely the sort of way that I approach work now. That it's always about research. It's about, you know, really digging into history and psychology and lots and lots of different. I'm not to say that you don't do that at drama school. I don't know. But I think it's really about where you feel best placed to experience that sort of education, given who you are. So I wouldn't say to anybody, well, no, definitely go that way. I think it's really about find out who you are and also trust the people around you. Because if you don't know who you are, there will be people around you who will be able to say, I think, given what I know of you, this would be a better plot for you.
And so you were talking earlier backstage about, you told a story about you're telling about not getting into drama school, and your daughter said, do you think you would be a better actor if you had gone to drama school? Knowing yourself now, do you think your years shaped at university and post-university working not in show business and in temporary jobs and secretarial jobs, do you think that kind of shaped the actor you are today and the kind of real life experiences you bring to your role? Or do you think you would have been a better actor traditionally trained at RADA or youth theatre?
I think I would have been a different actor, definitely. I don't know. I think it's sort of, it's tricky to, it's, you know, that whole sliding doors thing. If I had been there and that had happened, I think, you know, that image of being in a rowing boat where you're just pulling on the oars and you can't see where you're headed because your back is facing the place that you're headed towards, and it's only as the things float past you in the water that you can see that you're actually moving and that, you know, and that stuff is happening around you. I think to a degree we go into things, you know, with our backs, and it's only by looking at what past us that we go, oh wow, that's where I've come from, rather than being, you know, with our head and our eyes on the horizon going, that's where I want to be. But yeah, it's a provocative question. Would I have been a better actor? I think probably I didn't get into drama school because I wasn't a very good actor. And they were quite discerning. And actually, I hope that I have learned to be an actor by doing the job and just being around brilliant creatives and collaborators, and just learning from them. I used to joke that I basically just look at the best person in the room or the most interesting and just copy them. But I think that we all have an element of that where we're just by osmosis taking in those elements of other people that feed into who we are and help us to become, to develop, to grow, and become more of ourselves, more of the essence of ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess moving past that then, from after graduating university, was it always television that you wanted to mainly go into, or at that point were you auditioning for kind of everything, TV, film, theatre?
Well, I left university and said I never ever want to be around actors ever again. I'm done with that. And so then I went to secretarial college because Mum had said, listen, you need to know that you can earn money. You have to be able to look after yourself because it's, you know, it's a precarious business if you do think you want to go into it. So I went to that and then became went and worked in a lot of offices, you know, worked at the Family Planning Association as an administrator, did, lots of temping in various different organizations, which was brilliant because you're with real people, which was really valuable. And then I saw an advert in the Stage newspaper for actors for a children's theatre company in Birmingham. So I was still living in Birmingham after university. And I applied, I got an audition, I got the job, I got an equity card. And then a year later, I then went for an audition at BBC Pebble Mill for a job doing some radio, which I thought might be for 6 weeks. I had no idea. It turns out it's The Archers, and I've been doing it for 30 years. So, you know, it's all these things that just sort of fall into place. And you could never have imagined it. I couldn't have imagined that I would start my working life as an actor with a children's theatre company, working puppets. I couldn't have imagined that developing voice work would have been something good for me. But circumstances dictated that, as though almost like I didn't know myself, but I was known, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of similar to what Asif Kapadia was saying last night, that he just turned up on the set, didn't really know if this, and it just, everything fell into place. And I guess
it was great, wasn't it? And him saying, "Oh, someone just asked me, could you do this as a favor?" And he was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'll help out." Of course, it turns up, and that's absolutely the place where he gets bedded and rooted and grows.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of contradicts my next question. Whereas, what would you consider your big break if we were using those terms? But I guess it's just a combination of, like you say, being around creative, interesting people and just finding your place as a young actor. Or would you mark a moment where you were like, okay, this is now what I'm doing and I'm doing it well?
Well, I did. Excuse me. I did a lot of fringe shows in London in the 90s. So that was really because there isn't really a repertory theatre system anymore, which there used to be, where actors would be out and just be in rep companies around and rep theatres around the country and doing, rehearsing a new play every week and then being in rep with that. That used to be the model. We don't have that anymore. So to a degree, the fringe theatre scene in London was where I did my learning how to be in a company, how to use different skills and be in sort of in different air, really. So I did that for a decade, and then was doing various bits of TV, and then auditioned for a TV show. But, nobody really knew what it was like, and I happened to get that job, and it happened to be a show called Black Books, and nobody knew that it would become this kind of beautiful underground. Nobody saw it in the beginning. That has become this sort of cult treasure, really. And it was after I did that I then started getting more scripts sent to me, and then off the back of that, then I got Green Wing, and then all of those. So it was weird because I'd done a decade of like very serious theatre, Schiller and Shakespeare and Molière, and then I get this job on Channel 4, and suddenly tons of a comedian, the label gets attached there. So it was it's weird. So probably Black Books. This question was the turning point where people went, "Oh, wow, who's this?" And I went, "Wow, I've been here a while." The people just don't see many fringe shows in London.
Yeah. And then I guess after then, was that when you kind of returned back to the Shakespeare and the more classical stuff when you took on the role in Much Ado?
Well, I then did a decade. So I did a decade of sort of smaller theatre. Then I did a decade of TV.
Mm-hmm.
And I also got married and then had children, and didn't want to go and do theatre because I really thought it was important to be around at bedtime and bath time. And then when my youngest was about a year old, my agent said, "Well, maybe we should start thinking about doing theatre again, just because you've been away from theatre for 10 years and it would be good to just, get back into that." So I sort of tentatively went, "Oh, yeah, maybe." Thinking, she'd maybe get me a gig reading some poetry in a pub at lunchtime, twice a week, maybe. And she came up with this audition for the RSC, and I was like, "Oh no, I can't do that, no." Then the carrot was dangled because it was Marianne Elliott directing Much Ado, and Josie Rourke directing King John. So I went along because I wanted to meet them because they're just such interesting women. I went along to meet them, and then it was offered, and I said no. I turned it down because I just thought, I can't do that. I've got 3 children. My youngest is 18 months. I can't do that. So my husband and my agent did a kind of pincer movement on me. and they persuaded me that it would be possible. And then my mother-in-law, my beautiful, beautiful mother-in-law, who was alive then, said, if something looks impossible, it's probably the very thing that you should be doing.
Mm.
And I said to her, but look, if I take this, 5 people's lives are instantly changed. And she looked and she went, 8. I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, we'll have to be involved with childcare, won't we? And you'll also need, someone, a nanny as well, to help with, it can't just be us. So that was difficult, saying yes to that job, but knowing that that meant 8 people's lives were going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a cost involved with women in the workplace.
Yeah.
And it takes a village to allow that to happen.
Yeah, I was about to ask on that point, do you think that male actors have that same kind of, ask themselves the same questions and have the same kind of dilemmas when taking on big roles like that?
I think it's changing.
Yeah.
I think it's changing. I think that, the actors that I see, who, if they're married with children, there's a lot of that. Okay, well, you're going to do something, then I'll do something. And that kind of, that integrative approach to, how we do working, but also balancing out, from being present for. So I think possibly in the past it may have been easier for men. I think it's becoming more complex now because there is a greater equilibrium, I think, or it's emerging.
So from Much Ado, and then for the next kind of 6-7 years, you did stage shows every year, 3 Olivia nominations. What are your kind of memories from that time, doing back-to-back shows at the National, being on stage, 7 years in a row, and 3 Olivia nominations? How do you think about that time as an actor?
I just can't believe. I can't believe it happened. Getting the Olivia for Much Ado, there is a terribly embarrassing film of me accepting the award. Really, really embarrassing. But it wasn't, it was utterly authentic. I was so surprised. And then getting other nominations, I feel so grateful and in awe of what's possible if you have all those people around you to help you, do difficult things. And then the last nomination was for a musical I did, which was a musical adaptation of Almodovar's film Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, which I took 2 years to persuade them not to cast me. I mean, I was really insistent that I was not the girl for them, and they wore me down, and then I did it. And to begin with, I wasn't very good, and I think over the 6 months that we did it, I kind of found a way. So then getting a nomination for that in the category of Best Actress in a musical, that was really phenomenal because it was such hard work. Because I'm not a singer, so I had to really learn how to do that properly from a standing start, and that was really hard work. And I got quite sick. A lot of the company got very sick because it was such an intense show. I'm just sort of filled with amazement, really, at what's possible when you think it's not in you.
And I guess you said that piece of advice you got about doing challenging things because they're challenging, and that's what makes them worth it. In terms of those roles, having done them, is that testament to that mentality that it was challenging, but it was worth it? In the musical, you didn't think you could do it, or you didn't think you could do it well, and you did it, and is that kind of testament to that piece of advice, or did it break you? Did it put you on the edge of a nervous breakdown?
Yes, it did. And the weird thing is, in the play, she's a character who takes Valium because she's been deserted by her husband. She's pregnant. Everything's going mad. Her best friend is involved with a Shiite terrorist. It's all nuts. So she takes Valium and then accidentally drugs everybody in her apartment. So everybody's unconscious apart from her who hasn't drunk it. And then they put me on Valium. Or, in my real life, because I ended up on crutches. I was in so much pain. And so it was a weird crossover between art and life. It was really hard. It was really hard. And so now my heart and head and all of my celebration go out to those actors who are musical theatre performers, because what they do for 8 shows a week is unbelievable. They are supreme athletes. And then what happened to them, a year ago when all the theatres closed and all those athletes were then, that was it, they were out of work. And I saw this incredible photo, this photography exhibition where huge West End stars have been photographed in the jobs that they've been doing through lockdown. Beautiful woman who's who's on Western stages all the time. She's now an Amazon delivery driver. Gets £1 per Amazon delivery. £1. And so I have nothing but respect and admiration for what those art athletes do, and they haven't been cherished and treasured and valued.
Yeah, and I guess on that then, moving forward to the more, you mentioned the past year and about how for a lot of performers it has been a really, really terrible time. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what you've been doing over the past year and some of the projects that you've been involved with?
Yeah, so in a way I was well placed at the beginning of lockdown because I had just finished shooting the 6th series of Friday Night Dinner and also a show for ITV called Belgravia. So I was just, at the beginning of lockdown, was just preparing to do lots of press. So I could do that on Zoom and to do stuff for Friday Night Dinner as well. So those went out, those were aired at the beginning of lockdown. So it looked like I was really busy. Actually, we'd made those the year before. I was then approached by Marianne Elliott on behalf of Nick Heitner for his company, who were commissioned by the BBC to film all of the Alan Bennett monologues from the 80s and 90s and to remake them in a socially distanced way on the sets of EastEnders, because that had all shut down. So I rehearsed with Marianne on Zoom, and then we shot that at Elstree. And then actually when the Bridge Theatre was able to open up again in September of last year, we then did the monologues on stage. So they were live to a socially distanced audience. Then last autumn, the National Theatre was supposed to do a production of Romeo and Juliet last year with Jessie Buckley and Josh O'Connor, which obviously couldn't happen. So the National Theatre came up with this beautiful idea of making a film which was set in the deserted Littleton stage, the stage and the scene dock area, and the corridors of the theatre. So we made the Romeo and Juliet film, which is going to be aired on Sky Arts and PBS on Easter Sunday. So I have been able to do some work through lockdown. I'm in an incredibly fortunate position. I've also been able to do, because of the voice stuff that I started, 30 years ago, I now have a portfolio of stuff that I do in my voice in cartoons and narrations and that kind of stuff. So we've been, I have been protected from, the onslaught of a lot, a huge percentage of actors had to encounter this first year.
So thinking about two things that happened to you in 2020. First was the National Theatre live restreaming of Twelfth Night, and second was the Romeo and Juliet production that you is coming out on Easter with Josh O'Connor and Jessie Buckley. I've got two questions about those performances simultaneously. One, with the National Theatre live, when it was first filmed and streamed, and then receiving it again over lockdown, how did it make you think about the audience of theatre differently, and how did it make you think? And then moving forward to the Romeo and Juliet without our audience there, how did that make you reconsider? Who theatre was for, and what was the experience of kind of acting to an empty theatre?
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting question. Because the audience was so involved in the live performance of Twelfth Night, particularly with Malvolia, because the letter scene where she finds the letter, which she thinks is from Olivia, and it's actually been written by Toby Belch and Mariah. She talks a lot. She's trying to work out what it all means, and so she uses the audience as her confessor, as her therapist, as the the voices in her head, all her interior selves. So the audience become complicit, and that letter scene, which was incredibly hard to do, was only possible when the audience were there and for the camera on the side. But then when we filmed it for the NT Live, and there was a lot less audience in because a lot of the camera equipment was there, it was really difficult because I wanted to engage with people. That's what we're here for as human beings. We're not really here to engage with these little screens. That's not what we're here for. The fact that we can use them and this technology has helped us to connect, brilliant. But that's not our, in essence, what we're here for. So I found that very hard. And then watching the NT Live, I watched it at the end, it was the NT at home during lockdown. I was really thrilled that it was there in the absence of people being able to go to the theatre. And the fact that people were doing it as a kind of, sitting down at 7 o'clock and they'd have their drink and they'd have their, crisps and Maltesers and whatever, or dinner. And they'd watch it as if live. I thought that was a testament to why, as an audience, why we need to go and participate in stories. Then cut to doing Romeo and Juliet last autumn, which was rehearsed by Simon Godwin as if we were a company about to perform it live, but then went into a 17-day shoot and did it, individually in little pieces. But also knowing that you couldn't go near any other actor because we had to be socially distanced was really difficult. That was really difficult. And I really struggled through those rehearsals about, how do I do my job if I can't go near my daughter? And Simon Godwin changed the role of Lord Capulet to Lady Capulet. So they swapped those over. So instead of having the Capulet head being a male and being very dominant and the male who's controlling his daughter, you've now got a woman, which I thought was very interesting. And an almost silent father, which I think is also interesting for what happens to Juliet. But I couldn't go near her. Yes, we were being tested twice a week, and we were doing everything that we needed to do, going with the guidelines. But there was something in me that stopped me going towards other people, and I just thought, this is ridiculous. This is awful. And then at one point, I internalized it and thought, so that's the clue to Lady Capulet, is she can't go near her daughter, or she has to control her. And so the circumstances became the clue to what forces Lady Capulet to force her daughter to marry this guy Paris, who knows him. She calls it her friend. What does that do to a young girl, and particularly contemporary? And I think that that's very interesting, that, powerful women are as controlling as powerful men. Because human beings are always seeking after their own little bit of power because of our sense of powerlessness. So that's quite a long answer to a very interesting question. I don't know if I answered. So I wasn't so conscious of an audience doing Romeo and Juliet, but I was then conscious of what is authentic. What will somebody at some point watching this garner from it as being true? Mm-hmm. And it's about that, the inability to connect with your child for whatever reason, and the consequences that flow from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess one bonus as well of them being streamed and being so much more readily available for anyone across the country is that there might be kids or young people anywhere up and down the country who may not be able to go to the national will now be able to see the production, or it might be streamed to their schools or something like that. And I just wonder whether you kind of considered that and thought of that as like a plus point of having it filmed.
Absolutely, and that's why we instantly agreed to do the NT Live. When it was offered, when we were in production live, because it is the national theatre. Mm-hmm. And the show was not going on tour. It's how do we get that material and that experience into people's homes and schools? Mm-hmm. So I think it's a genius idea. You sort of you lose something of the liveness. Mm-hmm. I think essentially, as I said before, we are here to connect with one another, and something happens in the room of live performance, whether it is you know, in a club with a DJ, with a live band, at a gig, you know, something happens in the room on a molecular level, on a biological level. Something happens, and I think that we miss that. You know, of course, film is thrilling and challenging and transformational. Of course, it is. So, listen, if you can get the story into people's lives, regardless of whether you have that final element of liveness, story is. I'll tell you one thing. Desmond Tutu wrote this beautiful book called The Book of Forgiving, and he lays out the four-fold process of forgiving. And I'll just say this very quickly: 4 parts. First one, tell your story. Second one, name your hurts. Third one, forgive or not. It's your choice. Fourth, if you forgive, release or reclaim the relationship. It's a beautiful, complex book, and that's a very quick way of doing it. He says the first one is tell your story, and that is a supreme act of mental health. Mm-hmm. If you tell your story, you're engaging with your own care. And so I think that's why we are drawn to hear stories and tell stories, because somewhere we know that is good for our health.
You're on mute, Ben.
I'm muted. I can't hear you.
I'm muted. I was going to say, following on for that, about telling your story, it's an interesting concept for actors, you know, telling someone else's story, speaking someone else's words. If the kind of performance and acting can be therapeutic in that way, which kind of role have you found yourself drawn to in terms of telling your own story, and which one, if you don't mind saying, have you related to the most in that way, or a few? Because in the last few years, you've been lucky enough to work with Simon Godwin and work roles around you and his relationship, and so yeah, I'd be interested to hear which one do you relate to the most.
Well, I think that often, if not always, work comes your way because that's the work that you need to do. So in a way, work finds you out. And so it's not so much that I go, this is part of me that I want to reveal. Now, this is what part of my story, this is what I think is going to really sit well with this role or this production or this story. It's actually that the story informs you of what is in you that needs to be discovered. So in a way, the parts have revealed elements that were buried, that I didn't know were there. So I'm really thrilled when work comes my way, because then you're in a process of having stuff come into focus. You know, that which is hidden becomes revealed. I think that's really, really thrilling, to not know what's in you. You know, when you go and see a film or play or hear some music and you find yourself utterly moved, I think that is a great word, moved. You know, you are actually literally moved. You know, something changes that helps you see something from a different perspective, because there was stuff in you that you didn't know you were stuck in that position, or you didn't know that something had to be stirred up, because we solidify so much in ourselves for whatever reason, for protection, for ease, for, you know, our own natural inertia, whatever. But stories shake. You know, we're shaken and scared. So that doesn't really answer your question. But I think what I mean is that the roads that come my way are revealing me to me, which is probably only interesting to me and not to anybody else.
And just following on from that, in terms of the roles that do come your way, like you said, you know, with those productions at the National, you were lucky enough to kind of create roles and reinterpret roles and update them. But do you find that as an actor of a certain age that you're typecast in certain roles now, and there's not that kind of imaginative, creative spirit to redefine roles elsewhere apart from in theatre or in the National Theatre?
Yeah, well, I think it's that's always been the accusation with Shakespeare in particular. There are very few great roles for women, and if you have to play a male role in order to have a great role for a woman, then well, so be it. But then you get a director like Simon Godwin who says, well, why don't we try Lord Capulet as Lady Capulet? And I think that's to contemporize those stories is really valuable. And Simon Gordon doesn't see the point in doing Shakespeare any other way, actually, unless we're going, look, it's now, let's look at this now. So, yeah, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? I've had a lot of interviews with journalists. And interesting, particularly female journalists, you go, oh, so you're reaching that age now, aren't you? And they pull that face, they go, and I go, oh, what age? What age is that? Maybe the fact that I'm being offered male roles is indication that there aren't that many other great female roles around, or not so many. I was a judge recently on a beautiful playwriting competition for women about, new young women writers coming out. I had to read 10 plays, all really, really interesting, diverse, inclusive, worlds that I knew nothing about, experiences that were just illuminating for me. Not one role for a woman in their 50s. Not one in all of those 10 plays. Every other box to tick. I thought that was interesting. So what is it? What is it that's about, maybe it's just a middle point where, you have to stop being young and then be old. And then you'll be interesting again. Mm-hmm. How can we make middle-aged women interesting and valuable? I don't know. I'll just keep trying. Who knows?
And so, given that this is a film festival and a lot of the audience are young performers or young people thinking about getting into film, looking back or looking forward, what advice would you give to perhaps your younger self, or perhaps a young performer thinking about writing, thinking about acting, thinking about directing, thinking about all these roles, but as a job as well as kind of a creative activity?
I think at the moment we are in a devastated landscape. So it's very difficult to encourage people to continue at the moment because the industry is on its knees. There isn't any theatre. There is some screen work that's being produced at the moment, but the majority of actors are not getting work. So this is a very, very difficult time. I would say I would absolutely stand alongside what Steve was saying yesterday about just make films, just make them, do them on a phone, just make them. Write something, tell your story, find out who you are, write it down. It doesn't have to be good, but just keep on exploring what your story is, and get in a writers group, or do a Zoom, set up a Zoom improv group, where you're just zinging ideas around, because this is not good enough. But it's good enough for now. So just keep on reading and listening to music and going for walks and just stand and look at things and breathe and see what's there. It's really, really, if this time has given us anything, and I don't see this as at least, we've had more time, I've sorted out my cupboard. Because most people haven't sorted out their cupboards. Mostly, it's been a terrible time. But if there is something to be gone from it is that we're going to have to stop and just listen and develop those skills where you hear the smaller voice, you hear the layers. Isn't that the most incredible irony? Is that one of the effects of COVID is the loss of smell, the loss of taste. Is that we should be really investigating what smells are like, what sound is like, what is our heart like. So I think that's a very weird answer to your question, which is just keep investigating, keep asking the questions, and read and have conversation with somebody, play word association with somebody, I think you'll be really surprised what people come up with. It's really dark.
And I guess it kind of leads on from this, and I guess this is quite a difficult question because I am asking you to look into the future. So I don't know if you are familiar with fortune telling, but let's go for it. Do you think over the next year or so, the industry is actually going to become like almost have like a resurgence, and it's going to be like a huge renaissance of all this work that people may or may not have created over the past years where we've all been locked inside? Or do you think it's actually been a bit of a curse and it's going to continue to take quite a while to kind of get back to it?
I think like any devastation, like when you think of the wildfires in America last year, you know, it does devastate the land and homes and people. But weirdly, something comes back. There is always growth. And because of the charring and because of the carbonization, there is often, you know, greater riches that come from that. So my hope is that from this time of devastation, there will be greater riches that come out of the new green shoots. Of course, there will always be culling, you know, of stuff being burned away. You know, someone said to me that this lockdown is like a crucible. You know, it's going to be really interesting when we see what the elements of ourselves that are being burned away and separated, so you can really see the quality of yourself. And if you are wanting to be in this business because it's a fantasy, or because fame is interesting, or because, you know, you can't think of anything else, I think there will be a natural kind of shedding of that kind of illusion, because this business is really hard. It's really hard to sustain yourself in it and to keep your integrity, to still to protect your enthusiasm. And so my hope is that we will cherish one another in the industry, because we have seen it go away. And so you become then possibly more protective. Also, I've got to say, through lockdown, you get a series like I May Destroy You. Oh my goodness, you set that against what's been going on with the George Floyd movement and Black Lives Matter and all of that. It's like, this is a great time for thinking. You know, if that show had come out any other time, people would have gone, wow, that's interesting. Cool, that's, you know, it's quite intense, isn't it? But this has been a time where you've had to stand still and think, what does that mean? What is that show bringing up in me about abuse and power and hypocrisy? So how brilliant that we've been given that show. And it's a sin as well in this time where we can really go, well, actually, that I may have been moved.
Yeah, I do. I completely agree. I don't know whether, do we want to go to a couple of the questions, Ben, that are in the chat?
Yeah. I think that was kind of a mixture of optimism and forward thinking. And on that note, I think we've got some great questions from audience members. There's one here from Antoine, says, as an actor, what are the things you're expecting from a director?
Somebody who is as curious as I am to find out what might be happening in the room. Someone who is there with all their senses, their eyes, their ears, their smell, their taste, their history, their, you know, their feelingness, to go, what is happening here and what else can happen here? And so I think just, you know, someone who is as curious about the nowness of something's happening. I did this Pinter play in the Pinter season a couple of years back, and I was playing a woman. It was in a piece called Crown Alaska, and I was playing a woman who had been in a coma for 29 years, and she wakes up and her first line is, something is happening. I mean, that's the artistic process, isn't it? Where you sit there and you can feel the tingles, where you go, something is happening. I don't know what it is, but it's not nothing. So I think it's that, yeah, a collaborator who sits there in the presence of something happening.
There's another question here from Ade Damola who asks, what advice would Tamsin give to Black, Asian and or working class performers to break through?
Well, you are essential to how this industry is going to develop and grow and deepen. You're essential. And it's a crying shame that hasn't been the case properly before now. So I would say you collaborate with one another, make find access points, with people who understand that journey and who are open to that kind of inclusivity. I think, yes, be with your people that you know and recognize, but also make sure that you are part of an inclusive community yourself. I remember saying to, because I'm a mentor for Birmingham University for the course that I did, and I remember saying then, it's like, make sure that you do have a proper relationship with somebody who is at least 2 generations away from you and not of your colour, so that the relationship is real. Make find those active points, and then develop those relationships with somebody who yes, is understanding, but also doesn't get you, and grow those relationships so that each individual is then given the possibility to transform.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really good advice. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's actually almost perfect advice to end it on, in terms of what this conversation has been about, but what Watersprite is about in terms of bringing filmmakers together from all over the world. And so after this event, we've got half an hour before the next one. So any audience members who want to act upon some of the advice Tamsin has given, head over to the networking tab, where you can meet randomly someone else on the festival and begin those kind of creative, collaborative conversations. I think Jade and I just have one final question to round up this interview. And that is, what is next for Tamsin Greig? Where next?
Well, my husband, Richard Leaf, who's a writer, and I did a lockdown project where we developed a novel into a radio piece, and we've just recorded it for Radio 4, and it's going to be aired as part of the Woman's Hour radio drama slot. So that's 10 episodes over 2 weeks, and it's 2 people, a man and a woman, writing letters to one another. And it's not to do with lockdown, but it has that sense of these 2 people who don't know each other, but write to each other and develop this relationship against all odds. And it sounds like that's what lockdown is helping people to do, is to connect. Because there is something in us that says, if I don't, I may not be here for much longer. So yeah, so that's coming out probably, so I'm thrilled about that. And then of course the Romeo and Juliet film comes out on Easter Sunday, and who knows what? I don't know. The job, you're rowing, and the jobs just bob along. They come to you. I don't know. So it's just each day is a wonder and a terror, but no, mostly a wonder.
Right, we're getting a lot of thank yous through the chat from audience members. Thank you for your generosity to share with us, Tamsin. This has been really inspirational. This was brilliant, etc. So from me, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today. And yeah, it's been really, really interesting conversation. And I'm sure a lot of people have learned a lot about you and the roles that you inhabit.
Well, thank you very, very much for inviting me along to the conversation. I'm thrilled to be here, and I don't know what I'm talking about. I just say stuff that comes into my head, and if any of it's helpful, great. If none of it's helpful, ignore me. I mean, that's also great. But I think it's the fact that people are making films, they're telling their story, they're engaging in that supremely tender act of self-care is such an inspiration. So don't stop.
Thank you, Tamsin. Thanks, Jade, for joining me as well.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jade.
And enjoy the rest of the festival. We've got behind the scenes with Noughts and Crosses, the designers from the BBC adaptation of that at 1:30 on the